The boardroom on the 42nd floor of Cole Tower smelled of leather, ambition, and the quiet anxiety of men who had everything to lose. Damian Cole stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to the 9 executives seated behind him, and watched the city below the way a man watches something he owns but has never truly loved. He was 38 years old. His net worth had 7 zeros. His calendar was booked until the following March. And somewhere between his first billion and his third, he had misplaced the version of himself who laughed without calculating the effect it had on a room. "The acquisition closes Friday," said Victor Crane, his CFO, voice carrying that particular strain of manufactured confidence. "Lagos, Singapore, and Berlin will all be watching. This is the moment, Damian. Every number says run it up and get out." Damian said nothing. He watched a yellow cab thread through the snarl of Fifth Avenue traffic below and thought, not for the first time, about how easy it would be to disappear into that city. To be nobody. To walk into a diner and order coffee and not have anyone adjust their posture when he entered the room. Damian. He turned. 9 faces watched him. 9 men who had built their careers on reading the temperature of this particular room. "Close the meeting," Damian said. "I need the building on West 34th Street appraised again. Something's off about the occupancy numbers." Victor blinked. "That's a community center. It's not part of the acquisition." "Close the meeting, Victor." They filed out. Damian turned back to the window. The cab had vanished. The city churned on, indifferent. He had not slept more than 4 consecutive hours in 11 days. 12 blocks south and 38 floors below, Nadia Ose was doing what she did every Thursday morning at 7:15 a.m., fighting with the industrial coffee maker in the break room of the Harlem Compass Center and losing. She was 34. Her braids were swept back in a practical knot. Her jacket was 2 seasons out of fashion, and there was a faint smear of whiteboard marker on her left wrist from the grant proposal she'd been drafting since 5 in the morning. She did not own a car. She had $847 in her savings account. She had not been on a date in 16 months, a fact her mother brought up with the consistency of a postal service. Nadia, Kwame, her program coordinator, appeared in the doorway. His face said everything before his mouth did. The city denied the appeal. She set down the coffee pot. "All 3 floors?" she asked, even though she already knew. "All 3 floors. They're citing the Cole Group development proposal. The whole block is zoned for commercial redevelopment. We have 30 days. 30 days. After 9 years of after-school programs, job training workshops, free counseling sessions, community dinners. 9 years of watching this particular square block become the heartbeat of a neighborhood that had been told it didn't matter. 30 days. Nadia picked up her coffee. It tasted like burnt rubber and righteous fury. "Give me everything on the Cole Group development proposal," she said. "Every public filing, every zoning variance, every name attached to it." "Nadia." "Every name, Kwame." She walked back to her office, sat down, opened her laptop, and typed 2 words into the search bar: Damian Cole. The photograph that loaded was a man at a charity gala in a custom tuxedo, surrounded by people who all appeared to be competing to stand closest to him. He was looking past the camera at something no one else could see. His jaw was sharp. His eyes were sharper. And there was something in his expression, not arrogance, precisely, but a kind of locked door, that made Nadia's stomach tighten with the particular anger she reserved for people who had power and used it carelessly. She was about to close the tab when she noticed something in the background of the photo. A yellow cab. The same broken taillight pattern she saw every morning outside the center's front door. A small, irrational chill moved through her. She closed the laptop. "What are the people in your community fighting to protect right now? Drop it in the comments. We want to hear your story." The building on West 34th Street looked nothing like what Damian had expected. He'd told Marcus, his driver, to wait 2 blocks north. He'd worn a gray wool coat, no tie, no watch worth more than $500. He'd done this before when he wanted to look at a property without the property knowing he was looking. Usually it worked. Usually the property was a building, not a living thing. Through the glass front of the Harlem Compass Center, he could see 2 teenagers bent over laptops, a woman in her 60s doing what looked like a resume workshop with 3 younger men, and a hand-painted mural across the far wall that read, "You already belong here." He stood on the sidewalk for 4 minutes. Then he pushed through the door. The warmth hit him first, not just temperature, but the particular warmth of a space that has been used and loved for a long time. Then the smell. Coffee, dry erase markers, someone's lunch heating somewhere in the back. Then her. She came out of a side office carrying a stack of manila folders thick enough to suggest she was planning a small war. She was talking over her shoulder to someone behind her, mid-sentence, fully alive in the way that people are when they believe completely in what they're doing. And if they cite the zoning variance again, we cite the 2019 Community Covenant, because that document predates their entire proposal by. She looked up. She saw him. Something shifted in her face, not recognition, not yet, but a kind of animal alertness. The way a person looks when something in a room has changed and they can't yet identify what. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was controlled, professional, but her eyes were doing something more complicated. "I'm looking at the building," Damien said. It was, he would later think, the most honest thing he'd said to anyone in years. She set the folders down on the reception desk, crossed her arms. "I know who you are," she said. Not aggressively, factually, the way you state something you've already prepared for. He said nothing. "Damien Cole, your company filed the development proposal that's displacing this center. So either you're here to see what you're taking, or you're here because something about those occupancy numbers bothered you." He blinked. One slow, deliberate blink. "How do you know about the occupancy numbers?" "Because I filed the counter report with the city. 3 weeks ago. I cited 4 discrepancies." The room was very quiet. Behind Nadia, a teenager had stopped typing and was pretending not to listen. Damien looked around the space slowly, the way he looked at things when he was actually looking. The mural, the mismatched chairs, the bulletin board layered with flyers, each one representing a real person who had walked in here with a real problem. He looked at all of it, and then he looked back at her. "Tell me about the 2019 Community Covenant," he said. She didn't move for a moment. Then, very carefully, she uncrossed her arms. "That's going to take a while," she said. "I have time." She looked at him the way you look at a locked door when someone unexpected has offered you a key, and you're not sure yet if you want to use it. "Coffee," she said finally. "Terrible coffee." She almost smiled. It arrived in her eyes first, just barely, before she stopped it. "The worst you've ever had." "Perfect," Damien said. And for the first time in 11 days, he meant something completely. Damien left the Harlem Compass Center 1 hour and 40 minutes after he entered it, carrying 3 documents Nadia Osei had printed for him and a business card she'd pressed into his hand with the flat professionalism of someone who understood that feelings were liabilities. In the car, Victor called. "Where are you?" "The Singapore team has been waiting 20 minutes. Reschedule it." A pause. "Damien, this is a $200 million. Reschedule it." He ended the call. He looked at the business card. Nadia Osei, Executive Director. The card was printed on recycled stock. The font was slightly off-center. He turned it over. On the back, in blue pen, she'd written P.S. "The 2019 Covenant has teeth. You should read all of it." He read all of it. He read it twice, actually, in the back of the car while Marcus drove loops around the park because Damien hadn't told him where to go. By the time Marcus finally said, gently, "Sir? Destination?" Damien had underlined 7 passages and made 4 phone calls, none of them to Victor. He told himself it was professional interest. A smart investor reviewed all the counterarguments. He told himself that the way she'd looked at him, not with deference, not with performance, but with the straightforward assessment of a woman who had no reason to be impressed, was simply refreshing because he was surrounded by people who needed things from him. He told himself he would not go back. Nadia sat in her office for 20 minutes after he left and did not move. She was angry. That was the correct emotion. Damien Cole was the man whose company was erasing 9 years of work with a zoning variance and a development proposal. He was the kind of man who wore a casual gray coat to walk through a neighborhood he was about to consume, as if the informality made it thoughtful rather than strategic. He had eyes that listened. That was the dangerous thing. Most powerful men looked at you while constructing their next sentence. Damien Cole had looked at the mural and actually seen it. He'd looked at the 2019 Covenant document with the attention of someone who was genuinely recalibrating, not performing recalibration. That made him more dangerous, not less. Nadia. Kwame was in the doorway again. "Do not say anything about him," she said. "I wasn't going to." "Kwame." He raised both hands in surrender and retreated. Nadia opened her laptop, pulled up the grant proposal, and stared at the cursor blinking in the empty field marked Primary Stakeholder Challenges. She typed, "The Cole Group development threatens to displace." She stopped, deleted it, tried again. She stared at the blank field for a very long time. Then her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Osei. His voice. Deep and unhurried, with the particular quality of a man accustomed to being heard without having to raise it. She closed her eyes for 1 second. "Mr. Cole, I read the full covenant. You were right. There are 4 additional provisions your counter-report didn't cite." She opened her eyes. "I know. I was saving them." A beat of silence. Then something that was almost a laugh. "That's good strategy," he said. "I know it is." Another silence, different in texture from the first. "Can we meet again?" he asked. "Professionally." Nadia looked at the blank field in her grant proposal. Looked at the photo of the center's first cohort of kids pinned above her monitor. Looked at 30 days spreading out in front of her like a road that might run off a cliff. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m. And bring your own coffee. Mine will kill you." He brought 2 cups of coffee from the cafe on the corner of 131st Street and showed up at 7:58. She noted both facts and said nothing. They worked for 3 hours at the table in the center's small conference room, which smelled of whiteboard cleaner and the ghost of 100 community meetings. Nadia had laid out everything: the full covenant documentation, city records going back 11 years, letters of support from 47 local businesses, and a binder she referred to as the case, delivered in a tone that suggested it was not a metaphor. Damien read everything. He asked precise, targeted questions. He challenged 3 of her arguments and was right about 2 of them, a fact she acknowledged without softening it. He revised the 3rd argument himself and slid the paper back across the table, and when she read what he'd written, her expression shifted in a way that had nothing to do with the legal strategy. "Where did you study?" she asked. "Law and Urban Economics, Columbia. Then I went and made money instead." "Of course you did. That's not a compliment from you." "It wasn't." He looked at her steadily. She looked back. Outside, a child was shouting something joyful in the main hall. "Tell me about how the center started," he said. She hadn't expected that. She picked up her coffee cup, found it empty, set it back down. "Why?" "Because I've been looking at the legal architecture for an hour. I want to understand what it's protecting." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My brother Marcus came home from 2 tours without a job, without support, and without anywhere to go that felt like it was built for someone like him. I watched him sit in our mother's apartment for 8 months, getting smaller and smaller, and I thought there should be a place. A real place. Not a waiting room dressed up as a resource center. A place where someone actually sees you when you walk in." She stopped. Something had shifted in her expression. She hadn't meant to say that much. Damien had gone very still. "Is he?" "He's good. He teaches the job readiness workshop on Tuesdays now. He's the first face our new participants see." Damien looked at the table. Something moved through his jaw. "Good," he said, quiet and specific in a way that was more than agreement. "You have a brother," Nadia said. It wasn't really a question. "Had. Theo." He said it the way you say a word you only let yourself say rarely. "Car accident. 6 years ago. He was 29. The conference room was very quiet. "I'm sorry," Nadia said. "He would have hated me for buying this block," Damien said. Then he looked up, and something in his eyes had broken open just slightly, just at the edges, the way ice cracks before it gives way. "He would have walked in here on the first day? He was that kind of person." Nadia didn't look away. "Then maybe you're here because he couldn't be," she said. Gently, but without softness. "The way you say true things." Damien stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood up, began gathering the documents, put them back into perfect order. "We'll need to file the amended counter-report by Friday," he said, his voice back to its professional register. "I'll have my legal team draft the supplementary language tonight." "Your legal team?" "The center's legal team. Directed by your strategy." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer immediately. He picked up his coffee cup, found it also empty. "Because the numbers were wrong," he said finally. "And I don't like wrong numbers." He left before she could respond. She watched the door close behind him and thought, that is not the whole answer. She thought about Theo, about Marcus, about the particular grief of men who tried to carry everything alone until they couldn't. She thought about the way Damian Cole's voice had changed when he said his brother's name. She did not let herself think about anything after that. Have you ever had someone surprise you? Someone you thought you had all figured out? Tell us in the comments. The story broke on a Wednesday. Not a legal filing. Not a city council report, a gossip site. Cole Group billionaire's secret strategy. Community center save a PR stunt? The article included a photo of Damian entering the Compass Center, a quote from an anonymous source inside his company, and the allegation that his involvement was designed to manage optics ahead of a larger development announcement plan for the spring. Nadia read it at 6:14 a.m., standing in her kitchen. She read it 3 times. Each reading made the coffee in her hand taste worse. By 7:30, her phone had 17 missed calls. Her inbox had 42 new messages. The center's social media pages had spiraled into exactly the kind of chaos that destroys years of community trust in 48 hours. She drove to the center. She stood in front of the mural "You already belong here" for 60 seconds. Then she sat at her desk and wrote one line on a legal pad. Who is the anonymous source? Victor Crane. Damian had known it was Victor before he'd finished reading the article. Victor had been his CFO for 6 years, had absorbed the Singapore delay, the 34th Street pivot, the amended counter-report, each one with the smooth professionalism of a man rearranging his strategy rather than abandoning it. The anonymous source quote had Victor's cadence, his particular brand of plausible deniability. Damian called him at 7:45. The article, Damian said. A pause. I saw it. Did you? Damian, the Singapore deal closes in 3 weeks. You've spent 11 days personally involved in a 30-day legal dispute over a. Victor, did you give them the quote? Silence. The kind of silence that is its own answer. He ended the call. He stood in his penthouse kitchen, marble, immaculate, purchased for its view rather than any relationship with cooking, and felt the full weight of what Victor had actually done. Not to him. To her. To the center. To the 47 community members whose names were in that binder, who now had to read an article saying their last hope might be a billionaire's photo opportunity. He called Nadia. She didn't answer. He called again. Nothing. He drove downtown himself. She was on the phone when he arrived, pacing the length of her office. She looked up when he walked in, and what moved across her face was not anger. Anger would have been easier. It was something more exhausted than anger. Something that looked like the specific pain of a person who had allowed themselves to trust and had immediately been reminded why they'd stopped. She held up one finger. He sat down. He waited. When she finished the call, she set the phone on the desk and looked at him. Tell me it's not true, she said. Her voice was very level. It's not true. Tell me there's no spring announcement. No second development phase. No larger plan that this, she gestured vaguely at the space between them, is meant to make palatable. He met her eyes. I canceled the spring announcement 4 days ago. I haven't told my board yet. I was trying to work out how to restructure the entire development proposal around preservation rather than replacement. She searched his face. He let her search it. Who was the source? My CFO. Former CFO as of 40 minutes ago. She sat down slowly. She put her elbows on the desk and her face in her hands for a moment, then lifted it. The community is asking me if I was naive, she said quietly. People I've known for 9 years are asking me if I was played. And what are you telling them? I'm telling them I'm finding out. He leaned forward. Nadia, I understand why you can't take my word for it. I understand the history. People who look like me have walked into neighborhoods that look like this one and stripped them clean and called it development. I understand why every instinct you have says I'm doing the same thing. I'm asking you to let me show you that I'm not. How? By filing the full restructured proposal with the city by end of this week. Every provision, every preservation clause, every community benefit agreement public record. Not a promise. A document. She looked at him for a long time. Long enough that the silence became its own conversation. You have until Friday at 5 p.m., she said. After that, I file our counterproposal alone and we go to litigation. I'll have it done by noon. She nodded once. Then she said, very quietly, I want it to be true. That you mean it. I want that to be real. I know, he said. And because there was nothing else to say that wouldn't make it smaller, he left it there. He filed at 11:47 a.m. On Friday. The rest, She nodded once. Then she said, very quietly, I want it to be true. That you mean it. I want that to be real. I know, he said. And because there was nothing else to say that wouldn't make it smaller, he left it there. He filed at 11:47 a.m. on Friday. The restructured proposal was 42 pages. It preserved the Compass Center in full, created a community land trust that legally prevented commercial displacement for 30 years, allocated a floor of the adjacent building for expanded programming, and transferred controlling voting rights to a community board. Damien's lawyers had not slept in 48 hours. His board had called 12 times. He had answered twice. Nadia read it at her desk. It took her 90 minutes. When she finished, she sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. She called him. Page 37, she said when he answered. The board composition. You gave away your tie-breaking vote. Yes. That's not standard for a development agreement. She paused. That's genuinely giving it away. I know what I signed. Another pause. Why? Because Theo would have wanted to vote, he said. Just that. Nothing more. The silence that followed was the kind that people fill with words when they're afraid of what might happen if they don't. Nadia didn't fill it. Thank you, she said finally. Come to the center on Saturday. Marcus is hosting the job readiness workshop. He'd want to meet you. Saturday arrived with the particular clarity of an October morning when the city remembers it can be beautiful. Damien arrived 10 minutes early. He wore a dark sweater, no tie, no watch worth $500. Marcus Osei was nothing like what Damien had expected and everything like what he'd hoped. He was 31, broad-shouldered, with a laugh that arrived with no warning and a way of listening to people that reminded Damien uncomfortably of his brother. He ran the job readiness workshop with the precision of someone who had once needed it himself and understood exactly what was at stake. Damien sat in the back and watched. He didn't introduce himself as Damien Cole, billionaire. He introduced himself as Damien, friend of Nadia's. The two teenagers from his first visit were there. The woman from the resume workshop was there. The room was alive with the specific energy of people who were fighting for their own lives and had been given a room in which to do it. After, Marcus found him by the coffee station. She told me what you did. With the proposal. She told me about you too, Damien said. Why you started coming here. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Damien. It was terrible coffee. Damien drank it without complaint. She doesn't let people in easy, Marcus said. If you're going to be a person in her life, you have to be the kind of person who stays. Damien looked across the room to where Nadia was sitting with 3 of the program participants, her head tilted forward, fully present in the way she was always fully present, as though whoever she was with was the only person who existed. I know, Damien said. Later, after the workshop, she walked him to the door. How are you feeling about the board presentation on Monday? She asked. They're going to hate it. And I'm going to let them hate it. She stopped at the door. The late afternoon light came through the glass and did something interesting to her face. Have dinner with me, he said. It came out without the calculation that usually preceded anything he said. Not a meeting, not a strategy session. Dinner. She looked at him for a long moment. That same searching look, looking for the locked door, he thought. Looking for the performance. Tuesday, she said. And you're not allowed to make a reservation somewhere where the menu doesn't have prices. He laughed. An actual laugh, unguarded, arriving before he could assess its effect. She looked startled by it. Then something warm moved through her expression. Tuesday, he agreed. The board meeting on Monday lasted 3 hours. His 7-member board of directors, each of whom had built their position on the assumption that Damien Cole made decisions like a machine, clean, profitable, unsentimental, sat across the conference table and looked at him with the careful expressions of people assessing whether he had lost his mind. They did not use those words. They used words like fiduciary responsibility and shareholder value and reputational risk and long-term brand coherence. Damien let them finish. The restructured proposal stays as filed, he said. The community land trust is non-negotiable. We move forward with the adjacent development as the revenue vehicle. If anyone at this table believes that makes the project financially unviable, I'll buy out your position today at a 15% premium. No one took the offer. He walked out of the boardroom at 3:15 p.m. Feeling, for the first time in recent memory, like a man who had made a decision that aligned with every part of himself at once. He took out his phone to call Nadia. He had 3 voicemails, one from his attorney, 2 from a number he didn't recognize. He played the second one. The voicemail was from a journalist at the Times. She had obtained documents, internal Cole Group communications from before his pivot, that showed a preliminary development timeline projecting the center's demolition as Phase 1. The documents were dated 6 weeks ago, 3 weeks before Damien had walked into the Compass Center. The documents were real. He remembered the meeting. He remembered the preliminary timeline, which had been prepared by Victor's team based on his initial acquisition parameters, before Damien had instructed the pivot. He remembered specifically telling Victor to destroy the Phase 1 documentation. Victor had not destroyed it. He had saved it. The article ran online at 5:47 p.m. By the time Nadia called him at 6:02, the center's community board had already seen it. By the time he answered, she had already read it twice. "Tell me about the Phase 1 document," she said. Her voice was different from any voice he'd heard from her before. Not angry. Quiet in a way that was worse than anger, the quiet of someone absorbing a wound before they decide what to do with it. "It was a preliminary projection from my CFO's team before I redirected the project." "Before you redirected it?" "After walking in and seeing that the community center was real and people were watching. After it became a liability to proceed as planned." "That's not." "I was a calculation, Damien. Not accusatory. Factual. That was worse. You walked in because the occupancy numbers were off and you wanted to know what you were taking. And then you looked at the mural, and you looked at Marcus, and you recalibrated. And all of this, the proposal, the covenant, Tuesday dinner, all of it was still a recalculation. A smarter strategy. No. I have 47 community members who are asking me to look them in the eye and tell them what this was." "Nadia, I need you to not call me for a few days," she said. "I need to think." The line went dead. He stood in the corridor outside the boardroom for a long time, his phone in his hand. The city was audible 42 floors below him. Indifferent, as always. He thought about Theo. About how Theo used to say that Damien spent so much time making everything safe that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be inside something real. He thought about how he'd looked at the mural and felt something shift, something that wasn't strategic, that was simply true. He thought about her voice. Quiet. Absorbing the wound. He thought about how the worst part of this was that she was right about the beginning. He had walked in as a calculation. The feeling had come later. And there was no document in the world that could prove the order in which those things had arrived. He sat down on a bench in the corridor and, for the first time in 6 years, put his face in his hands. If you were Nadia, what would you do? Stay or walk away? Tell us in the comments. We want to know. 3 days passed. Nadia worked. She answered emails about the restructured proposal which, the city confirmed, had been validly filed and could not be unilaterally withdrawn without community board approval. She met with her attorney. She led the Tuesday morning staff meeting with the precision of someone who has decided that motion is the appropriate response to grief. She did not cancel Tuesday dinner. She did not confirm it either. On Wednesday evening, she drove to her mother's apartment in the Bronx. Her mother, Adizo Say, age 67, the most unsentimental woman in the 5 boroughs, set a bowl of jollof rice in front of her and sat down. Tell me, her mother said. Nadia told her. All of it, the proposal, the article, the Phase 1 document, the way he'd said Theo's name, the way his laugh had arrived unguarded at the center door. Her mother ate jollof rice and listened. The document was from before, her mother said when Nadia finished. Yes. And the proposal, the real one, the one that protects the center, he filed that himself. Yes. Then what is the question? The question is whether he would have done any of it if he hadn't walked in that door, Nadia said. Whether it's real or whether it's what a very smart, very guilty man does when he's caught in the process of taking something. Her mother looked at her. Adizo Say had the specific kind of eyes that had seen several decades of human beings behaving badly and well and all points between, and had developed excellent calibration. Baby, she said, you can spend the rest of your life waiting to find out if someone would have loved you under different circumstances. Or you can pay attention to what they're doing in the circumstances you have. Nadia looked at her rice. He sat in Marcus's workshop, her mother continued. He drank terrible coffee. He gave away a vote he didn't have to give. That's not what a calculation looks like. That's what a man changing looks like. How do you know the difference? You don't. Always, her mother said. But you know what you feel when you look at him. And you keep calling it dangerous. The things that scare us the most are usually the things most worth doing. Damien did not call. He had told himself he would not call. If the only way she could trust what was true was to come to it herself, then calling was another form of strategic pressure, and he had spent enough of his life optimizing outcomes. He went to the center on Thursday. Not to see her, she wasn't there on Thursdays. He went because Marcus was running the second workshop of the week, and he wanted to be useful. He helped set up chairs. He sat at the back again. He answered questions from two participants who asked him about small business financing with the directness of a man who had stopped performing expertise and started actually sharing it. On the way out, he stopped in front of the mural. You already belong here. He stood there long enough that a child from the after-school program stopped beside him and looked up at the mural too. My mom painted that, the girl said. She was about 9, with a missing front tooth and the absolute confidence of someone who has never been made to feel small. It's perfect, Damien said. She says it's for people who forgot, the girl said, already moving away. That they belong somewhere. Damien stood there for a moment after she was gone. He pulled out his phone. His thumbs hovered over the screen. He typed, I understand if Tuesday doesn't happen. I understand if none of this happens. The proposal stands either way. The center is protected regardless of what you decide about me. But I want you to know that the thing I feel when I'm there has nothing to do with the numbers. It never did, after the first morning. I just didn't know how to say that without it sounding like a strategy. He stared at it. He sent it. Then he walked out into the October air and sat on the front steps of the Harlem Compass Center and waited, with no optimization and no calculation and nothing to offer except the truth. 40 minutes later, footsteps. He looked up. Nadia stood at the bottom of the steps. She had come from somewhere. He could see the edges of a long day on her face, the loosened braid, the jacket she'd been wearing for 12 hours. She looked at him sitting on the steps, and he looked at her looking at him, and neither of them spoke for a long moment. You're sitting on my steps, she said. I know. You look terrible. I've had a hard week. She climbed the steps and sat down beside him. Not close enough to touch. Close enough that the possibility was present. I talked to my mother, she said. What did she say? That I keep calling things dangerous that are actually just true. He let that settle. She's right, he said. I know. She looked straight ahead. The streetlights were coming on along 34th Street, one by one, in the dusk. I'm still scared. I know, he said. So am I. She turned and looked at him, then the full, searching look, the one that was looking for the locked door. He let her look. He didn't arrange his face. She found what she was looking for. Or what she found was the absence of a locked door. Tuesday, she said quietly. The restaurant without prices. You can make the reservation. He exhaled. Something in his chest, clenched for 11 days, and then for 3 more, released. Tuesday, he said. They didn't make it to Tuesday. On Monday morning, Damien received word that a hostile shareholder group, 3 of his board members, Victor Crane's former allies, had filed a motion to contest the restructured development proposal on the grounds of fiduciary breach. Their legal argument was thin, but their public argument was not. Billionaire self-destructs over woman ran as a headline before 9 a.m. The story had photographed someone at the board meeting, probably a board member's assistant, had captured Damien on the steps of the Compass Center on Thursday evening, sitting there in his expensive coat like a man who had forgotten what he was. Everyone in his world called before noon. His attorney, his remaining board members, 3 of his largest institutional investors. All of them said variations of the same thing. Walk away from the development proposal, settle with the community center through financial compensation, and end whatever personal entanglement had clearly compromised his judgment. Walk away. Take the money. Run. He thought about Theo. About Theo's voice saying, you spend so much time making everything safe. He called Nadia at 10:15. I need to see you, he said. I saw the headline, she said. Her voice was steady. Are you all right? The question landed somewhere unexpected. Not what does this mean for the center? Not what are you going to do? Are you all right? No, he said honestly. Can I come? Yes. He walked in the front door of the Compass Center at 11 a.m., carrying nothing, no briefcase, no documents, no strategy. He walked past the reception desk and down the hallway and stood in the doorway of Nadia's office. She was standing. She'd been waiting. The morning light came through her window and laid itself across the mural visible through the glass panel. You already belong here, and something about the light and the mural and her standing there made the whole room feel like something that had been prepared for exactly this moment. My attorney says I should settle and walk away, he said. My board says the same. The three investors who called this morning said versions of the same thing. What do you say? She asked. He looked at her. At the office she'd built over 9 years. At the photo above her monitor, the first cohort of kids, 23 faces, every single one of them looking at the camera like they expected the world to see them. I say I filed the right document. I say the center stands. I say that a hostile motion from men who are angry I stopped being predictable is not a reason to undo something true. She was quiet for a moment. This is going to be ugly for a while, she said. The litigation, the press. It's not going to be easy to stand in the middle of this with me. I know. Damien. She said his name differently this time, not professionally, not cautiously, but the way you say a name when you've decided you trust it. Everyone told you to run. I know. Why are you still here? He crossed the room. Not fast. With the deliberateness of a man who has decided, fully, what he's doing. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. Because this is the first place I've been in 6 years that felt like belonging somewhere, he said. Because of what your brother built on Tuesday mornings, and what a 9-year-old girl's mother painted on that wall, and because of you specifically, you, and the way you fight for things like you were made to do exactly this. He lifted his hand, and very carefully, giving her every opportunity to step back, tucked a loose braid back from her face. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not because of the numbers, not as a strategy, just because this is where I want to be. Her eyes were bright. She held it together for exactly 2 more seconds, the particular pride of a woman who does not let people see her break, and then she let out a breath that had been held for 11 days, and 3 more, and stepped forward into him. He wrapped both arms around her. She pressed her face against his chest. Outside, the city made its ordinary noise. Down the hallway, someone was setting up chairs. They stayed like that for a long time. The hostile motion failed. It took 11 weeks of depositions and filings, and one particularly brilliant oral argument by Nadia's attorney supplemented, at strategic points, by Damien's, but the motion failed. The restructured development proposal was upheld. The Community Land Trust was formally established at a board meeting in February with 47 members present, Marcus Ose casting the first vote. The restaurant without prices happened on a Thursday in November, because Tuesday had been eaten by legal motions. Nadia wore a deep blue dress and arrived 12 minutes early, which she would later deny. Damien was already there. He stood when she walked, and not performatively, just stood, the way you stand when something important arrives. You look, he started. Don't, she said, sitting down with a smile that she did not try to stop this time. Beautiful, he finished. I was going to say you look like yourself. She looked at him across the table. That's the best compliment I've ever received. I know, he said. I meant it that way. They ate. They talked not about the proposal, not about legal strategy, but about her mother's jollof rice and his brother's terrible puns, and the books they'd both read twice, and the particular loneliness of people who are very good at their jobs. They talked the way people talk when there is nothing left to protect. After dinner, walking along the river in the November cold, she put her hand in his. He looked down at their hands, then up at her. They said you'd paid with your life, she said quietly. The headlines. That staying had cost you everything. It cost me a CFO and 3 board members and 6 months of press coverage, he said. And I got. He looked at her. I got a life, he said. That's not paying with your life. That's finally getting one. She squeezed his hand. The river moved beside them. The city did what the city always does, churned on, enormous and indifferent. They were not indifferent to each other. That, in the end, was everything. In the spring, the center celebrated its 10th anniversary. The mural on the far wall had been restored, same colors, same letters, same brush strokes. You already belong. Here. Damien stood in the back. Nadia stood at the front, her voice steady and warm and fully alive, the way she was always fully alive when she believed completely in what she was doing. She looked up at one point and found him in the crowd. He raised his coffee cup. She almost smiled. It arrived in her eyes first, but this time she let it come the rest of the way. he had stayed. He was still here. And for both of them, that was the whole story. Damien gave up everything the world told him mattered and found the only thing that actually did. Who in your life has loved you like that by simply refusing to leave? Share your story in the comments below. And if this moved you, pass it on to someone who needs to hear it today.